Following the discovery of America, Europe entered a period of worldwide expansion and colonization. Three distinct economic systems and civilizations, Spanish, French, and English, struggled for supremacy. Spain and Portugal were the first to colonize. Theirs was a feudal economy and a civilization strongly influenced by the church. In America, France expanded westward with isolated posts and missions. New France was paternal. England established compact colonies on the middle Atlantic coast, with people economically self-reliant and individualistic, and bearing the seed of democracy. A series of military struggles resulted in the elimination of France from the North American continent in 1763. 13 English colonies gained their independence while continuing the Anglo-American tradition. The acquisition of Louisiana was inevitable. Spanish power declined. The Floridas were ceded to the United States. The people of Spanish America proclaimed their independence with American sympathy. The weak hold of the Spanish civilization on the Southwest and the Caribbean islands finally gave way under American pressure. New World colonization was started by Spain in the West Indies, then on into Central America and southern Mexico, into the mountains and rich silver mines, silver ingots carried by pack and then by galleons to Spain. To the north on the plateau arose the cattle. Because of commerce raiders, Spain established outposts in Florida. In the west, the Spanish settlements extended to Santa Fe in 1609. And only now, after more than a century of Spanish colonization, did the French settle at Quebec the year before the Spanish had expanded to Santa Fe. French posts sprang up along the inland waterways in the search for beaver. After nearly a century, the French controlled a vast region, but one with a sparse population. After more than a century of Spanish colonization, the English settled in Virginia. Sandbars obstruct much of this coastline. The Chesapeake Bay, however, offered excellent harbors. The larger rivers were navigable only to the fall line, separating the fertile coastal plain from the higher Piedmont region. To the west was the Appalachian Barrier. Along the coast, climate and soil were favorable. The southern colonies could be nearly self-sufficient in foodstuffs. Tobacco was to become the big export crop. Growth at first was slow. English Catholics settled in Maryland. Virginians migrated southward into Carolina. English, French, and West Indians settled at Charleston. By 1689, the culture of these southern colonies was characterized by a landed aristocracy supported by tobacco and slave labor. In New England, the rivers flow southward, and only a few were navigable. The indented coastline offered excellent harbors. The natural resources were the fishing banks for food, and the vast virgin forests which provided lumber for ships and homes. The rocky soil, severe climate, and short growing season permitted agriculture only to supply domestic needs. To this setting came the Pilgrims in 1620. Soon thereafter, the Massachusetts Bay Colony was founded, with rather crude beginnings. But soon, more settlers arrived and built permanent dwellings. People from Massachusetts settled the valley of the Connecticut River. Roger Williams led settlers to Rhode Island. The New Haven Colony was extended over to Long Island. Later, the New Haven Colony was combined with Connecticut, and the Plymouth Colony with Massachusetts. New England was now substantially settled. The houses were generally in villages, conducive to active community life, centered around the church and the town meeting. The Middle Atlantic region had excellent harbors. Large rivers, some navigable, lead far inland, and these facilitated extensive fur trade with the Indians. Between ranges of mountains flowed rivers flanked by broad, fertile valleys, where colonists soon were to produce wheat barley, apples, pears, peaches, and dairy products, butter and cheese. The Dutch settled on the Hudson River, at the mouth and at the head of navigation. Shortly thereafter, the Swedes settled on the Delaware, but their weakness invited subjugation by the Dutch under Stuyvesant. Soon, the English took possession of all New Netherlands. Penn founded Pennsylvania as a Quaker colony. Early growth of these middle colonies was comparatively slow, owing in part to the manor system with its restrictions on individual enterprise. In addition to their mainland colonies, the English founded colonies in Bermuda, Barbados, and other West Indian islands. These possessions were important both in naval and commercial affairs. Thus, by 1689, Spain was well established in the south. France was secure in Canada and claimed Louisiana. England was firmly planted on the Atlantic and claimed Hudson Bay. In New England, shipbuilding flourished. Industries not competing with the mother country were free to develop. Fish and whale products were the most profitable industries. Rum and leather production also flourished. New England supplied fish, rum, and ships. The middle colonies, flour, pork, flax, fur, and staves. The southern colonies, tobacco, rice, hides, and naval supplies. There was extensive trade among the colonies. New England shipping interests were extensive. New England shipped rum to Africa, traded for slaves. New England shipped rum to Africa, traded for slaves. New England shipped rum to Africa, traded for slaves, carried these to the West Indies, and exchanged them for molasses, sugar, and money. Carried these to the West Indies, and exchanged them for molasses, sugar, and money. Carried these to the West Indies, and exchanged them for molasses, sugar, and money. Carried these to the West Indies, and exchanged them for molasses, sugar, and money. Much of the foreign trade was in triangles like this in order to balance accounts. However, many raw materials and the money received in the West Indian trade went directly to England to balance accounts for manufactured goods. The southern colonies, because of their tobacco, carried on direct barter with the mother country. The colonial merchant marine and foreign trade were extensive and far-flung. After 1689, for a century, immigration from England was small. Native American colonists pushed the frontier back, northward, westward, and southward, to build new homes in the wilderness. Up the fertile river valleys to their headwaters, through the mountain gaps, pressing the French on the north and west, and Spanish on the south. Virginia and Pennsylvania were the most populous of these English colonies by 1763. Now to go back. The French dreamed of a vast empire in the Mississippi Valley, with its capital at New Orleans. Posts and forts were built to exclude the Spanish and the English in the south. In the northwest, the French encroached on the Hudson Bay claims with outposts. English and French both claimed hinterland. The French strengthened their positions. And when English regulars and colonials under Braddock advanced on Fort Duquesne, they were severely defeated. The colonies rushed new defenses. During the next 2 years, the English suffered defeats on the northern frontier. But in 1758, a small English force advanced up the Mohawk and across Lake Ontario and reduced Fort Frontenac. General Forbes succeeded in taking Fort Duquesne. The following year, Fort Niagara fell to the English. The French were forced to withdraw on Lake Champlain. Wolfe sailed up the St. Lawrence to attack Quebec. First, Wolfe occupied the opposite shore and bombarded the city. A frontal attack below the city failed. Finally, in desperation, Wolfe secretly moved his troops above the city. Under cover of darkness, the troops climbed to the Plains of Abraham. Montcalm, the French general, decided to attack, After the second English volley, the French line broke, and 4 days later Quebec surrendered. This battle sealed the fate of New France. The following year, 3 English and colonial forces converged on Montreal, which without resistance. In accordance with the treaty, England retained all of French Canada, the eastern part of Louisiana and Florida. West Louisiana went to Spain. Thereafter, the English colonies looked forward to rapid, peaceful expansion, little realizing the revolt would soon in America.